they don't want.
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to correct. And there were obviously mistakes and stuff too. People a lot of times don't understand junk and shit like that. But I work with it all the time, every day. So uh, he sent that first edition in. There was nothing wrong with it, but it was informal and all that. And like I said, it looked like it had been written in red and corrected in blue.
Yeah,
And he was
I bet.
just got to change the style of English you're using, and he could do it, and he
Hmm.
did. He caught on to what I was talking about, switched over because he was smart enough to do that.
Well, how did Les become the principal author? How did his name become first on that book? I mean, how
Oh
did
my
he
God,
even
what
get involved?
left? Oh my God, okay. First off, my dad and I didn't get along. We fought the whole time, but that does not mean he was a bad vet. He was the best
No.
vet I ever met.
Yeah,
And I'll give him credit for everything that he did. He wasn't stupid. He was smart.
you bet.
Credit all the way down the dang line. But we fought.
Yeah.
And he thought I was a total loss.
Aw,
And never failed to let me know. You're never going to amount to anything. That kind of junk.
that's terrible.
My major, he didn't like it. Most of what I'd done. But he looked at Les and, by golly, that's what, he wanted something like that. And he fell in love with Les. He really did. Oh, he's really got his stuff together. On the other hand, I didn't dislike Les. I thought, he was he was one of those people in my age that at the time in the 60s and 70s that was kind of bothering me. I just got out of the Army. I was sick and tired of left wing people. I was sick and tired of being told, what a failure I was, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's where it's at. But then he tells me, that he's going to support him. He's going to give him the profits from the book. And I thought, he. But anyway, that's where it was.
Now,
He
did you
he had
work
a
on the book too at all? Did you
uh,
help him with it at first, since you were a
and
language major?
yeah, I did with language, yeah. But I'd be lying if I said I knew squat about horse hoofs. I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I was, you know, every bit of that was left to him, and my dad was a super expert on it. That's all there was to it.
Yeah.
And that one of the things that bugged me even at the time was Les didn't know anything about that stuff. I mean, he had a basic knowledge, and he'd been doing some carrier work and everything, but as far as all that other stuff about all the diseases and everything and all the problems, and my dad had been working that for 30 years.
Yeah.
And he'd had an immense interest in it, and he'd been looking at wild horses since he was a little kid.
See, that's
He
something.
talked to me about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's about all I can say about it. The rest, if you had called me and asked me about other aspects of the vet business, I could have told you a lot more. I probably watched 100, no, 500 spay jobs, and I remember helping him do cesarean sections on cows that left me covered with blood all the way up to my belt.
Wow.
That kind of stuff. It was an interesting childhood, and I don't regret it at all.
Oh, yeah.
It's never boring, never.
So then Les's folks were pretty well off.
Oh, Lord, yeah. Like I said, I think they had 2 clothing factories in California. I think.
Hmm.
Just vaguely remember that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And he was never short of money. I noticed that at the time. He just wasn't a problem for him.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, did you know, see what it said in People magazine was that um he took Farrier classes just to see if he could prove that their theories were right. And so
I didn't.
he took like a 12-week Farrier class,
Uh-huh.
you know. Um, but he was talked out of those theories. You're right. He didn't know anything because he was easily talked out of it with one sentence from Jamie Jackson, and they have no heels.
Yeah.
The theories in your book are not going to work. Well, I had to say, but the theories did work and they would have worked. And I'm going to tell you right now, there'd be lots of horses and people alive today if it weren't for them two
Yeah.
getting in their little cahoots thing. It really seemed when I looked at the People magazine article like he was really trying to take credit for the whole thing. Did you ever see that article?
Yeah, I remember seeing it. I don't know if I read it or not. Dad had it, and he showed it to me. I remember it had a picture of Les in there, and I remember Dad telling me that, boy, he's going places. You know, he's really gonna come out
Yeah.
with something. And I didn't think so, but you know that explains why I said like he didn't. He just seemed to have a basic knowledge of farrier work, and that I didn't know it was because he'd taken that course. It's interesting. All of this is, but
I,
he, Dad. Okay, there was something before that. When he started off working there at the vet hospital, he did both large animal and small animal, and the large animal included cattle and horses.
uh-huh.
Well, Dad had brucellosis, Bang's disease. He picked it up, and he accidentally injected himself with some of the vaccine one day, and boy, I thought he might die. He was really sick.
Oh, wow, yeah.
It's like the results of brucellosis, when you've got an active case, it's like malaria, very much. It turned bright red, and you know he had the shakes and tremors and everything. He was in bed for about a week,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no cure for it. But anyway, after that, he dropped all cattle work. He wouldn't do it anymore.
Wow.
No, take it back. I think he had a couple of special customers that he had pleaded with him to work on their pet cow or whatever. And he did
Yeah.
that. As far as the big herds of cattle and everything, we wouldn't do it anymore. He couldn't. He couldn't afford to take the risk again. He said that just getting the vaccine on his hands, he could tell he was getting sick from it.
Wow, yeah.
He did that. Then he began concentrating on the horses because they had so much more time.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he began getting bothered. He was getting bothered by what you have already said. He was amazed that there were so many people that had horses that had bad hoofs.
Mm-hmm.
And, before that, he had concentrated on navicular disease almost totally and race horses and like that. But then he expanded out to pet horses and the whole thing. And then I can remember he was pretty amazed. He said, boy, there's too many of them out there that they may not be totally crippled, but they are not in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
He was right. That's why he ended up writing the book, big part of it.
So how did he come do you know how he came to know Jim Miller, how those two came together?
Oh, Jim was there in town, and Jim's wife, dad knew her.
Mm-hmm.
The state, she was from state veterinarian, and the state vets, there were several of them around, always coming over because Dad had a heck of a lot of knowledge, and they would come over and push him for information about stuff they were working on because he usually had seen it before, and which is fine by all people.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Jim's wife very well. She was very nice, but did I tell you before she committed suicide?
Yeah. Yeah. You
Yeah,
did tell
she
me
was.
that. Yeah, I bet.
Uh,
Did you say she was a veterinarian herself?
yeah, she was a vet.
Oh my goodness.
That's how we knew.
Wow.
She'd come over to the house, talk to Dad, and then once in a while, Jim would come with her.
Mm-hmm.
So Dad and Jim got to be better friends than Dad and his wife than Jim's wife did. She's okay. She's fine. There's no
Mm-hmm.
problem. But Jim and Dad hit it off. Dad was in love with cowboys.
That's awesome.
Word of God. If he could have married a cowboy, I think he would have.
And Jim was a cowboy.
Jim was a cowboy, and we had all kinds of cowboys around. Like I said, Jim Kelsey and oh God, Hank Bremer, and Bremer had been a world bucking Bronco champion back in the 20s and 30s.
Uh-huh.
There were all kinds of them around, and yeah, that was pretty interesting. I tell you the truth, most of them I liked pretty good. They were all right.
Yeah.
Jim drank too much, but it didn't get in the way of things.
Mm-hmm.
I realized later afterwards that he was drinking quite a lot,
Oh.
but he didn't cause trouble. Didn't get aggressive. He didn't get mean, and he got along. I got along with him pretty good. I thought he was an okay guy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how the deal was set up at the time.
And so did Jim had experience with wild horses too?
Yeah. How much? I don't know, but I know he was familiar with them.
Okay.
At the time, I didn't question him about any of this. I kind of just took it all for granted.
Sure. Yeah.
Just how it was. I was a kid, and I hadn't developed, the way I dealt with things like that. If I'd have been 40 at the time, I probably would have quizzed Jim quite a bit.
Yeah.
Just because I was more interested in how this whole thing was set up. The questions you're asking now, back then, if I'd have been, older, I would have intrigued me too, and I would have been trying to find answers to.
Oh, hey, I grew up around wild horses and I never thought twice about the fact that they don't wear shoes and are perfectly sound,
Yeah.
and stuff. So would you tell me the story about your dad again, where he grew up on the Yakima Indian Reservation, did you say? And that he was always okay.
County, and the area that we lived in bordered the Yakima Indian Reservation. Up there was a ridge up above the borderline between the two, and it was called the Tanum Ridge. And that's where we went up to look at the wild horses. I never saw one, but that's where they were. You could drive up a dirt road and up on top of it, and then just drive up on top of the ridge. There was a dirt road up there, and he'd drive around until he'd see him. But when he was a kid, they went up there and they took their own horses, pet horses, and rode up there. And he said they'd spend all day looking for the wild horses, and they usually find them, he said. And partly because of the fact that water was so scarce, there was a stream that was the border between the Yakima Indian Reservation and Yakima County. But at the time, there was a fence in there, and those wild horses never came down there. So if they wanted water, they had to go to that one spring that was up
Mm-hmm.
there, the only source of water for them. And that's where he said that they kept trying to catch the wild horses so they could ride them, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't get near those horses. They would take off, and their pet horses couldn't even start to catch them. So they pulled that stunt with putting a fence around the spring and leaving those horses without water for about 2 days until they'd come up there. And he said the horses would all be standing around the dang watering hole, and trying to get through and couldn't do it, but they were so thirsty they wouldn't leave. And he and his buddies would go down there, and he said the horses were so dehydrated they couldn't run very fast, and they'd rope them, catch them, and jump on them and ride them for about 3 seconds. They got thrown. But he said it was sure fun. Yeah.
That sounds like something kids would do.
Yeah, boys of that age, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Now, did you say that he also got wild horses in to process in his vet?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I can remember specifically okay, you got to understand. A lot of the time I was either away in college or something. I had jobs from the time I was about 12 on. So I might have been working too. During the summers, I worked over in Yakima in the orchards and picking and thinning and all kind of stuff. But so a lot of times it just wasn't there. But I specifically remember 2 batches of wild horses coming through and me helping them with them. And, I think I told you that Dad had that post set out in the middle of the field out in back with a rubber tire or, an inner tube attached to it. And he'd hook that horse up to it, and that horse would pull until he was so exhausted he guarded the wheel. And that's how he wanted him. And then he'd inject him with Valium or something similar and knock him out, and then he'd tie him up. And the whole time that horse would sit there glaring at me like, if I could get up, I would stomp you into the ground.
Now, who was the guy that brought the horses in? Did he have some sort of contract with the government to move them or something like that?
Oh, no. He'd get, people wanted horses, or BLM wanted horses brought in. They get reports that, that there were horses out there that they felt were starving to death because there was minimal feed for them, or there was minimal water or whatever. And so there was a variety of things. There were also people who wanted them for zoos or things like that.
Yeah.
We did a lot of that stuff. We people, they brought in wild buffalo, bison, and I remember the bison went to Hawaii to a zoo.
Oh my goodness!
But bison were prone to get brucellosis and a couple of other things.
Yep.
And so they came in these incredible cages that they built out of 2x12s, and even with making them out of 2x12s, I was always afraid those bison are going to bust through them, because every now and then they go nuts and bang up against the wall, and you see those boards just push to their limits, and oh no, don't let them out. Oh God.
Yeah, I worked on a ranch with buffalo, and we had to work them every once in a while, and holy Hannah, it was not like working cattle.
No, it was not. And the job I had with the buffalo was different. We would get their head through one end. There was an open portal to feed them on one end, and we'd get their head through and give them feed out there, and then we'd get a rope around their neck or whatever we did, and tie them off so they couldn't move much. And then they really didn't throw much of a fit when we'd give them the shots. Dad would give them the injections, and they were okay. Once in a while they'd kick a little bit, and that's about it. But then it was done, and we called the people who were transporting them, and they'd come and pick the whole thing up and take it off. And it was kind of interesting stuff. And like I said, we worked a lot of exotic animals. Bob Mock, the guy from Hollywood that had all those wild animals that he had trained for the movies and everything. He was an interesting guy. And so that meant we ended up working on everything from chimpanzees and cockatoos to anything else in between. The boa constrictors, which I wasn't crazy about, but
yeah,
it was all right. that didn't like doing the skunks. I really didn't like it. And I didn't like, oh yeah, people would, back then, okay, in the 50s and 60s, they didn't have much in the way of laws forbidding ownership of wild animals.
Yeah.
And so people would find a bunch of baby skunks, and they would get so excited, and they'd grab them up, and usually they tell us, well, they were abandoned, the mother wasn't there, so we didn't want them to starve to death, and that, whether that was true or not, we never knew, but they'd pack them up, and these are little tiny things, you know,
Yeah.
3-4 inches long, and they'd bring them in, and they'd want their scent glands removed. And, oh boy, Dad said, okay, we're going to remove, oh God. So we go out to the barn, and we had to do the surgery out there. And as good a surgeon as he was, every single time we did that, he would break at least one of those scent glands.
And kill a skunk?
No, it wouldn't kill a skunk. Wouldn't even hurt him.
Okay.
You know, they were, what he did with these babies, we had a great big, I don't think it was a 2-gallon jar with a lid on it, and he put cotton in the bottom, and he filled the thing full of ether. Ether was the anesthetic of the day. Before we had the gas anesthesias, and we would put each of those baby skunks in there until they were asleep, and then take the top off, and so they were out of it for 20 minutes, and that's about all it took to get the scent glands out, and they'd peel them out, and if he broke it, no, it didn't hurt the babies at all. But boy, it made me stink so bad. Oh my Lord! And I remember. Okay, people at this point, people usually tell me, "Well, you should have used tomato juice on them." I told them we knew all about tomato juice, and it didn't really work very well.
Yeah.
You know what we used to get the smell off, and it did work?
What?
Gasoline.
Oh yeah. Wow. Okay, that makes sense.
And it did work, but I wasn't crazy about it because that meant I had to strip down totally out in the backyard. Well, Dad scrubbed me down with gasoline, and then I had to put my underwear back on to go back up and take a shower. And as it was, I had glasses that had passed the plastic frames, and it would get in that plastic, and it would take 2 weeks to get rid of it. I'd go to school on Monday. I'd be walking down the hall in between classes, and boy, heads would turn. Boy, do you smell that? No, I don't really.
You smell like gas.
I smell like gas, but more, I smell like skunk.
Like skunk, yeah.
Oh boy. I was so glad when they passed a law saying that they couldn't own it. But the bad thing was people didn't believe us. They thought that if they got the scent glands removed, that they were going to end up with this nice, roly-poly, cute little animal.
Yeah, I know.
Well, they didn't realize that skunks are basically weasels, and they get tempers like weasels. They were bad.
Yeah.
And they grow up, and they were almost impossible to housebreak, and they were really prone to bite you. Not terrible harm, but enough to scare kids half to death.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean and stuff, because there's people around here every once in a while they'll get them, only they don't descent them here because you can't do that anymore,
Yeah.
and stuff. Well, that's good. Well, do you think that like when your dad he had that vet clinic, so then after he got older and he passed away, did somebody else buy that vet clinic, and is it still in operation?
Oh yeah, it's still in operation. It was, he had hired, he had several vets who worked for him. He had a huge business. I mean, it was not small.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the biggest in the country, and we had a huge pharmacy where you sold drugs out of, and all kind of stuff. It was big, and the vet hospital itself was big. I mean, it was a lot of rooms, a lot of cages, a lot of runs,
Wow.
stuff like that.
Okay.
And one of the vets that he had hired out of vet school during the summer, after Dad died, my mom sold it to him. His name was Erickson, and he still owns it. I think he may have retired, but I'm not sure. I haven't talked to him in years.
Mm-hmm.
But he changed things quite a bit. He didn't do quite the same stuff. He's a good vet, but I never heard him in handling any exotics. Yeah. I'm sure he did a few, but I'd have to ask him to find out. Yeah, and I can find that out from my sister. She talks to them all the time.
Well, do you know if there might be any of the records on the cases that your dad did stored in some box somewhere?
Nope, they got thrown out. I know it.
That's too bad. Okay.
Yeah. I will ask about that, but I was told way back when, because when my dad died, and then later my mother had a stroke.
Okay.
And we had to move her out of the house and into separate facilities and all that. And when that happened, the house that she was living in, she was no longer living. Our house, the hospital, our house was attached to it. Okay. So I lived, in the hospital that whole time.
Oh, okay. You lived right there at the
right there. My dad loved that. He, dog bark, and he'd go bang on my door and say, "Go down and shut that mud up." Oh God, ow! I'll put my arm in and let him chew on it for a while. So, anyway, things changed somewhat, and she moved out. And when they did, they had to empty that house, and there was, we had a friend named Sigali, and he owned the local garbage disposal thing. He was good friends with us, and he provided trucks for us to haul away garbage. Uh-huh. And I'll never forget that. They told me that they hauled 6 full truckloads of stuff from Mom's house.
Yeah.
And dumped it. And that's when I asked, did you keep Dad's papers? Well, I don't think so, because Mom couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
She couldn't walk, she couldn't talk. And basically the guys who were doing the hauling were just told, take all this stuff and throw it out, and they did. Mm-hmm. They had no idea. And Mom and Dad had a cabin up in the mountains, and it was full of junk too. I remember one thing I did want. Dad collected skeletons, and he had a elephant skeleton. I wanted that.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And I asked, did you find the elephant? No. Where is it? Well, we finally found it. It was at the cabin up in the mountains, and somebody, even though I told them I wanted it, they threw it out anyway.
Oh, gee. Yeah, that's cool stuff. Well, not going to say that. I collect horse feet,
You collect what?
Horse feet.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff. Well,
Dad had skeletons from just about anything you can imagine. If it had died at the place, he would keep it. And we'd take it out and boil it until the meat came off, and or sometimes we put it on an ant pile, and the ants would eat it off. On bigger ones, it was easier.
Yeah.
And on real big ones, we buried them, and I'll tell you another story.
Okay.
I was in the Army, and I got out in 1971, and I came back, and the day I came back, my dad said, "Hey, I got a job for you." Well, I should have known. He took me out and back, and he gave me the story. He said, Woodland Park, the zoo in Seattle, he said, they had a baby elephant that died, and so I wanted it for the skeleton. And he said they let me have it, and went and got it, and we took it out here in the field and buried it. That was the best way.
Oh my
Down.
goodness.
And he said, that's been 5 years. Said, I need you to dig it up.
Oh, great.
I said, okay, where's it at? And he wandered around out there for about 5 minutes. Said, right here. Okay, and he gave me the shovel. And 4 hours later, it was down about 6 feet. There were no rocks.
It wasn't there.
It wasn't there.
Oh my God.
I spent 2 days
looking for that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's over here, and I would dig, and of course it wasn't there.
Oh, that's awful.
And finally, I had so many blisters on my hand, I just told him, Dad, I can't do anymore. Even with the gloves, I had blisters breaking. And so he grumbled and griped about it, but he let me quit. And about 2 years later, he hired somebody with a backhoe to come in, or front-end loader, or whatever. And they dug about 6 holes out there before they found that stinking elephant. And it was nowhere near where
he had you digging.
Yeah, I often wondered, did he do that?
Did he do that on purpose?
Yeah. Did he?
Would you say that because of your dad's interest in wild horses and stuff, I'm sure he looked at their feet anytime they were around.
Oh, Lord, yes.
And so would you say, like, him and Jim did this showing, and Jim knew about wild horses too, but your dad was just as much a part of that, right?
Oh yeah, Dad knew more than anybody there.
Yeah.
Jim knew quite a bit, and I will not demean Jim at all. But Jim never had the opportunity like Dad did. I mean, every horse that came in, especially after he really got his interest in horses up, every horse that came in, you got checked better than it had before.
Yeah.
Especially on their feet, when he began realizing how many of these horses were at least a little bit lame, and he said, why? And same kind of deal. He came to the conclusion. I didn't understand it at the time.
Yeah.
Like I said, because we didn't get along very well, and we fought a lot. I refrained from talking to him unnecessarily because it meant a fight usually.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear about that. And here's the thing. This is a repetitive story that I've heard. I've known some just super people in my life whose dads just had this thing going on. The same as what you said. And I'm going to tell you that I think it's not just your dad. It's spiritual. You told me that you believe in God. Well, we're in a war. We're in a war between light and darkness. And so that situation, it wasn't just your dad. Those spirits, they saw something in you, that there was light in you, that there was goodness in you. And so they're just trying to destroy that, and that's their thing. Jesus said, the thief comes not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy.
You could be right.
Yeah.
When I came back from Vietnam, like most soldiers who went through that, my tour, awful lot of soldiers had worse than I did, but mine was bad enough. And when I came back, I was really messed up, and I started drinking heavily. And when I got out, I got worse about the drinking, and it just wasn't working, and I knew I was messed up. And I started just flailing around trying to find some answer to all these questions. It's like somebody put a blender in my head, my brain, and turned it on. And all the experiences that I had had prior to the military were suddenly thrown into doubt. I didn't know how to interpret them. I thought I knew how before, but all of a sudden things were all different. You know, I'd seen a side of people I didn't know existed before. And so what happened is after a couple of years, I realized, you know, if you keep drinking, you're not going to find an answer, because I realized by that time that it was really messing up my ability to deal with any of these problems. So I quit. And I haven't had a drink in 50 years probably. And it was hard. It was really hard. But then I read an awful lot of stuff. I read a lot of stuff that helped me. But then I kind of began to land on the Bible. I didn't read the Bible a whole lot, but I read a whole lot of other people's interpretations of it, because they were more understandable. I didn't. Yeah. And I look back on it, and the people I read, I was fortunate. I picked good people to read it. You know, they did a good job of explaining stuff.
That's good.
And I still didn't understand all of it, but I had that feeling that you get at times that this guy knows what he's talking about, even though I don't understand it. Yeah. I got to stick with it until I do understand it. Yeah. And I ceased telling anyone about what I was doing, because they were prone to make fun of me, and that it isn't that I couldn't handle it. My tolerance was really low. Yeah. And it was not something I felt was doing any good. So I just kept my mouth shut and read and read and read, and finally began to come up with some answers. Mm-hmm. And I'm still looking for answers to some of it, but I got enough of it so that my life settled down considerably. I stopped, like I said, I stopped drinking, and things got better. And then after about 3 or 4 years of that, I met my wife, and prior to that time, I couldn't have bought a date with $1,000 bill. And I was just shocked that she would even go out with me, because she had a job, she was doing well, and you know, I don't think I told you I went blind in the middle of all that. Oh man.
Oh man, really?
Oh yeah, I was blind for 18 months.
Oh my goodness.
They thought I had a brain tumor. I didn't. I had an autoimmune disease called central serous retinopathy. Uh-huh. My body was attacking my eyes.
Oh my goodness.
Trying to eject them, and the right eye took the brunt of it. And it was just god awful.
Yeah.
Well, I had a headache for 9 months that didn't go away. Never did stop.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't have any money, and like I said, my parents wouldn't give me any money. And I had been delivering newspapers up till that time, and then I couldn't do that anymore because I couldn't drive. And I went to a couple of ophthalmologists after I'd saved up enough money, and they were really good to me. And I remember the one I went to at first was just baffled. He thought at first I had a brain tumor. Mm-hmm. And I didn't. And when they found out I didn't, you know, they scratched their head, and he did something I never had happen before. He called other ophthalmologists who came in to look at me, and I was eventually looked at by about 5 or 6, and all of them the same way. They were trying to figure out what it was. It was a big puzzle to them. Mm-hmm. And finally, they settled on that. The central serous retinopathy, and what that meant was that I was leaking serum into my eyes, and when that would happen, it would cause my eyesight to shut down. It usually happened in one eye, but as soon as it did, that eye would go out. I couldn't see out of it, and then I get sympathetic blindness in the other eye. Things would start going dark, like I was telling him. You know, it'd go from light to darker until suddenly, it just was gone. And usually it would last for 1 to 2 hours, but I never knew, and especially at first, I was terrified.
I bet.
Yeah, you don't know if you're going to go blind totally or not.
Yeah. So
And
what did they do for you?
they gave me, the only thing they could think to do was to give me cortisone.
Mm-hmm.
And they put me on a huge dose of cortisone. I turned out to be really susceptible to this stuff. And within about 2 weeks of giving it stopped the headache, which I was extremely grateful for.
Yeah.
But, and it was clearing my eyesight up somewhat. But within about 2 weeks, I was developing cataracts.
Okay.
I'm 30 years old and I'm getting cataracts. And within 5 weeks, I could barely see again. And I had to have cataract surgery. They put in optical insert in the left eye. And I didn't have enough money for the other one. I got the other one done up here after my wife and I had saved enough money. And an optical insert, they remove the lens in the eye and they put a plastic one in.
So didn't you get any VA benefits?
Not for that, boy, I'll tell you. At the time, at the time I was in 67, when I was actually in Vietnam, 68, 69, I was in Vietnam. There were 500,000 men. They were just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I'd go up to the VA and try to get medical, and sometimes I'd wait 8 or 9 hours and still wouldn't see a doctor. They were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Wow. I couldn't blame them.
Yeah.
And finally, I just quit. And then they were extremely reluctant to say they would pay for anything.
Yeah.
And so it was a real different deal, I'll tell you.
Well, that's really an odd thing for a young man like that to get.
Yeah, I know. But then, I developed a couple of problems that probably came from Agent Orange, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And they aren't major, but But my base camp at Benoit turned out to be one of the places that had the highest concentrations of Agent Orange, because they were flying out of Benoit with the chemical. And when they would come back in, I knew what was happening. The soldiers that were in the planes dropping this stuff out would come back, and if they had a parcel barrel of Agent Orange, they were supposed to put all the parcels into one barrel so they could reuse them. They didn't want to do that. That meant they had to stay another hour or two, doing this. So what they do is they would empty all of it out coming in. So they covered all of this with Agent Orange daily.
Were you ever able to get anything out of the government for any of that?
Nope. I went up and, I developed esophageal cancer and went up and tried to put a claim in for that, and they said there was no indications that Agent Orange had ever caused esophageal cancer.
Yeah, see, it's too bad. See, my husband met this guy named Jim. I can't remember where he's at, but anyway, he took my husband's brother's case and he got him full on benefits. Like everything. And that's all he does is put in that stuff for veterans from Vietnam.
Well, like I said, I went up there and they turned me down. There was a guy here in town who'd supposedly been in Vietnam, and he got 20% or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out how he did it. He he went up there every day.
Yep.
Every single day.
Yeah.
And sat there, and when he got his interview, he would be just about as obnoxious as he could be. Until finally, I talked to one of the guys that had interviewed him. He said, "Yeah, we did it just to get rid of the son of a bitch. We couldn't stand him." But he had done that for almost a year. I couldn't imagine doing that. I wouldn't have done it if they gave me $1 million.
Well, see, like this guy took my brother-in-law's, and he's a vet himself, okay? But he just takes all these cases for everybody. And what happens is, yeah, they'll deny, but he just keeps submit. And finally, they have to give the interviews, and finally, they give you the money.
Yeah, well, I find this out way too late.
Yeah, but you got to have that help and stuff to do that, because yeah, they make it so hard,
Oh yeah. So anyway, it's late in the game.
Yeah.
So anyway, I cannot say I regret my time in the military, because it, like I said, it really messed me up. It changed me. But when I got out and I got my head straightened on, I found out I was much better adapted for life in this world.
Yep.
And that I was really grateful for. I just had a whole lot easier time with everything.
Yeah, it does prepare you for some things, Yep. And stuff. Now you told me that I remember you too. You told me that you had where you were supposed to be on a plane and you got bumped, and then
I was supposed to get a flight from Tansanut to the island of Phu Quoc, which is on the west coast of Vietnam. I'd been parceled out to the Navy, and I was supposed to meet this Navy ship there, and they had a leave date, or the date that the ship was going to leave. And I went in there, like I said, and everything seemed fine. They told me, they had open seats. They booked me on it. I came back the next day. They didn't call my name. They told me, "Oh, well, after you were here, we had 2 civilians come in." Civilians had priority over military. And these 2 civilians bumped me, and they took the last 2 seats. And then the next day when I came back, I thought there was going to be another flight out, and there was no flight. And they didn't know why. And so I started going from airline to airline. We had American Airlines, and we had Australian, and we had New Zealand, and we had Korean. And I think there may have been 5, but I'm not sure. But anyway, none of them had openings. None of them had a flight, and none of them knew why. And it was the 3rd day I went there, and they said, "Oh yeah, there is a flight. The Australians have got one," and they put me on that, and we flew out to Phu Quoc, and we saw the plane crashed on the landing strip.
On the landing strip, huh?
Yeah, they crashed during the land, and
did everybody die in that?
Most of them died. I never was able to find. You got to understand something about an awful lot of stuff. The military was so closed mouth; they didn't want information getting out. You're right. But I remember looking out my window and thinking, "Oh my Lord," Yeah, it could have been me. That plane broke right in half. I remember that. I thought, boy, that was something else. Like I told you, in my wallet, I carry a picture of the first rocket that landed next to me and misfired.
Yeah.
It landed 8 feet from me, and I've still got that rocket, because every now and then I'd tell somebody a story and they insinuate that I'm lying. I said, no, I'm not. I'd pull it out and show it to them. Of course, that isn't real proof, but it's much more than they had expected. And 2 of them landed next to me. Both of them misfired, which meant that although they fired, the fuse didn't detonate the rocket until the rocket had buried itself almost all the way into the ground. So shrapnel was flying around. Dirt flew everywhere, but not the shrapnel. And then I had one more that landed close enough it should have killed me. I still don't know why. But that's when I began really wondering, you know. Yeah. I was still working on this whole thing with God and all of it, and I thought, this is crazy. You know, this is not, these aren't accidents. They can't be. But on the other hand, I was extremely reluctant to make the assumption that God had something really special for me. I was chosen and selected by God himself, because I'd always thought that was ridiculous. And I talked to a couple of guys that had similar things happen. They had rockets next to them that misfired, and they all told me the same. Oh, I know God wants me to do this or do that. But, well, maybe. I don't read his mind at all.
What I think it is that God, you know, we can read people, we get to know people, we can read people, you know, we read our animals, we can tell what they're going to do. God has a sense of whether somebody is going to believe in him or not. You know, it isn't that maybe you're going to do something great or anything like that. It's just the fact that he has a good sense that you might seek him someday and believe in him, and then obtain eternal life with him, because he is our father. Now, you didn't have a very good relationship with your father, and I had next to none with mine. But this I know, I have studied the Word of God for 40 years. It is my first love. And this I know, that Jesus came to give us a knowledge of the one true God, who wants to be our Father and wants to have the same relationship with us that he had with Jesus. And so it's his family. And so he saw something in you that said, that man might believe in me. I've got to watch out for him. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, I'll tell you, I think what you're saying now is far closer to the truth than what I came up with. I'm glad I did not, land on a thing about it. I've got something special that is sort of the epitome of pride, and I don't see that anything really exceptional was done by me at all. Although I had a good life. I really did have a good life.
Good.
See? And don't regret any of it. But I think you're on target.
God. See?
Yeah. After a while, I had to. I thought, I don't know why, but man, what's the chances of? Okay, I went to a great deal of trouble to try to find out what are the odds of that happening with that airplane. Mm-hmm. You know what they were?
What?
20 million to 1.
Well, look there. 20
million. Yeah, and I'm thinking, wow.
God was betting 20 million to 1 that, this young man's going to believe on me someday and become my son.
Well, I'll tell you what the result of all that was. Suddenly, that doubt that I had, that confusion that I had when I came back initially, began disappearing. I began thinking, you don't understand all of it, but there's an answer, and maybe someday you'll get it, and maybe not. But if you don't, there is still an answer out there somewhere that's just beyond you.
Yep.
And that was great comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolute. You know, and stuff. Well, and looky there. Then you did believe, see?
Yeah, I did.
You know, he knows. And he doesn't make people believe, and people aren't predestinated one way or the other. But he's good at reading things, you know. He's a reader and a writer. Our God is.
You are absolutely correct. Wow, that's glad I get to talk to you about this. You've added a lot to my repertoire of things.
Good. Well, and you have really helped me too, as far as understanding more about your dad and the part that he played and stuff like that. And you know, here's something you need to know too. Okay, your dad, okay, we are in a spiritual war. The Bible says that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against wicked spirits in high places. Now, there's a chapter in your dad's book on the frog pressure doctrine, which was a doctrine that came up in the mid 1700s, and then it got put into the vet schools and carried on. And that is the reason, and they knew that, that is the reason that all these horses were going lame.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I'll be darned.
Yeah. And so this okay, there's just so much. See, it just blew me away to find out that where these doctrines came from. You know, in the 1700s, 1600s, 1700s, it was supposed to be the time of enlightenment. You know, in reality, those men were in terrible darkness. You know, it was just getting so that people could kind of freely start thinking about science and stuff like that, because they had the Reformation, which broke some of these countries away from the Roman Catholic Church, because what the Roman Catholic Church ruled, and you could not think outside their box on anything. Not scientifically, nothing. In fact, they didn't even want people to read and write if they could keep it from it, because they didn't want them reading the Bible.
Right.
So in the 1600s, like in 1629, there was this guy. Now, I just found this stuff out here in the last couple months. Okay, see, I'd been onto this frog pressure doctrine thing by this veterinarian. Well, he was, okay, so the farriers were the veterinarians for horses back in the 1700s. And then the first veterinary schools opened up, well, in France in like 1764 or something like that. And then in England, they finally opened their first vet school in 1792. And so the first one opened in France, but before that, the farriers were the vets. That's just the way it was. When they opened the school, then the profession split. See, and that's why they have this odd marriage. I look at it like that, like, you got the farrier, you got the vet, and they're always working together. What's this about, you know? So there was a farrier. He was farrier to the King of France. His name was Goulian Etienne Lafosse. And his father was also farrier to the King of France. Of course, these are farriers that don't really shoe horses. They're more veterinarian, because they're going to have a regular blacksmith shoe the horse. You know what I mean? Because they don't get their hands dirty and stuff. Well, he come along at a time. See, okay, so that's 100 years before. Okay, there's a guy named Rene Descartes. You ever heard that name?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, see, and this I have to tell you, I was absolutely mortified to find out the information I'm going to tell you here. So I had known about Lafosse and his frog pressure doctrine, how he said he wrote a little book and it had experiments on horses, and then it had and a new way to shoot. And then it got translated into English and it wound up over in England, and it was to keep horses from slipping on the pavement. Originally, his idea was to keep horses from slipping on the pavement, cut their heels down so they're walking on their frog because it's like a pad and it'll keep them from slipping. So this was his big idea. Well, okay, fine and good. I've been fighting this and writing against it and stuff like that. And of course, in your dad's book, there's 9 pages on it. That's a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And of course, and he didn't know. They didn't know all the details now that you can find out about this with the way the internet is and stuff. But they assumed that it was a farrier and this and back then when this doctrine came in. And back by so this was 1754 that this doctrine was established in France by the King of France's farrier. Now, the way it got established, because the master farriers of France wrote a refutation against it, because the way that they shod and the way the English shod was with a good amount of high heel and the frog off the ground. And this agrees with all the art going clear back to the Parthenon and beyond. There are like 250 horses on the top of the Parthenon, and they all have high heels. And there was a guy by the name of Xenophon, who was before Alexander the Great. He was like a contemporary of Plato and Socrates. And he said he wrote a book on horsemanship. And he said, when choosing a war horse, you want to look to the feet. The one thing you do not want to fail to notice is that the feet are high in front and high behind, meaning heel, with the frog high up in the foot off the ground. So this was what they believed in, and it is attested to not only by Greek and Roman and then all the medieval art, but all of Chinese art as well. You see these horses with these massive feet and these big heels and these high hairlines, until 1754. And so he comes up with this deal called a new way to shoe. And by 54, by 17, I think it was 79 or 69, something like that, it pretty much became the standard and the law in France. Because what was happening was the king was taking over the guilds so that he could tax them and have control over them. See, but another thing that had happened was, oh, well, science, it's the Enlightenment, supposedly. In 1666, the French Sciences Academy was founded. And of course, it's a bunch of elites. You know what I mean? And of course, the king would look to them for their recommendations and all this stuff. And so then he used the Science Academy to take over the guilds. See, but here's the thing. We got to even go back before that to Rene Descartes. Rene Descartes was in the military, and he had 3 dreams. But they were more like visions, and he said he thought it was an evil spirit. And he was told that he is supposed to change that to question everything and change how we acquire all knowledge. Well, then he becomes a great mathematician and he's a philosopher, which that's the most worthless profession on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
You know, he's a philosopher and he comes up with this philosophy called the beast machine. The beast machine, he said, only man
Man.
has a soul. Only man can feel pain. Animals have no soul and they cannot feel pain. What do you think that led to?
Yeah.
See, that led to live dissections on animals for 200 years. Yeah, horrendous. Horrendous. And so, I didn't realize this. This was I mean, I was just like, this literally broke me to find this out. Okay. Because see what happened was, and how I come about was, okay, so I'm searching this frog pressure doctrine thing and this Lafosse, and I find his book translated into English, and all I'm interested in is the shoeing part, this new way to shoe and this frog doctrine. Because see, by 1829, a guy named Bracy Clark that was one of the first to graduate from the English vet school, he came to understand that this was a false doctrine. And he says so in his book. He said that it had destroyed thousands of men and horses since its inception. He flat said it, Lafosse's false doctrine. So, then we go back, and so I'm going back to find out about Lafosse. And so I find his book, I'm reading his book about, the new way to shoe and all this garbage. And I thought, well, maybe I ought to read some of the rest of this book to see what's in there. It broke my heart.
Yeah, I'll bet.
He describes doing live dissections on horses. And then, of course, after you cut enough parts off, you kill them. See, these people were the scum of the earth. Okay? These were the most wicked, evil pieces of dung that have, I'm going to put them above Hitler. Okay? Okay? And so this Science Academy, okay, remember the Good Housekeeping stamp of approval?
Yep.
Okay, well, that's like what the Science Academy did to Julian Lafosse's ideas. All right? First of all, he did the dissections for him, or he directed them. And it was like, they do these, and because they were taught, because Descartes taught that these animals were just biological machines, and any pain sounds you heard, they weren't really feeling any pain. It was just the squeaking of a machine. See?
Yeah.
And so, and they love to do horses because horses are big animals and you can see them more clearly. And you know what? Horses suffer in silence. They're not like a dog.
Yeah.
Okay. So this doctrine, this frog pressure doctrine that is destroying all these horses that your dad was seeing, how can all these horses be destroyed, right? Okay, this is what it was, because and so I'll have to send you this paper by a guy named Henry Hamerling. He was a farrier and a scholar, and he put a book together that I have here called On the Horse's Foot, and it is everybody, anywhere, anytime that ever wrote on the horse's foot. And come to find out, the horse's foot has been written on and argued about almost more than any subject. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that?
Yeah.
So, but he wrote an article called The Proper Hoof Angle. And because see the proper angle, meaning the front wall, the dorsal wall, it can be different angles, you know. And if you raise the heel, the angle of the dorsal wall gets steeper.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wrote an article called The Proper Hoof Angle. And really what it's about is heel height. And he talks about how for 2,000 years it was believed, you know, I mean, Alexander the Great conquered the whole whatever on horses, barefoot horses with a lot of heel. Okay. And so for
Mm-hmm.
2,000 years, it was believed that these horses should have heel. And of course, that's where Jim Miller got the idea. That's where your dad got the idea from these wild horses. Because because man hasn't touched them, they're allowed to grow their heels. See?
Yeah.
And that's why they're sound. In fact, right before I called you, see, now there are all these wild horse advocates groups on Facebook and stuff, and they take, oh, boo coo pictures. And so I'm going through all these pictures, finding pictures of horses' feet with lots of heel, because it is the exact opposite of what the frog pressure doctrine promoted and what Jamie Jackson promoted as the wild horse foot, which was one dead rear foot off a mare that wore her heels out that he got from a freezer from BLM at Palomino Valley.
Yeah.
And that it
Ooh.
is that image that has gone over the whole world.
I just noticed it's I'm past the time I have to take my medication. I have to go in. But you've really been good talking to you. I'm gonna call my brother and sister, and
Okay.
like I said, see what I can get out of them. And
Okay.
I have to look at Dad's bookie, and I haven't looked at it in years. But really fascinating talking to you. Thank you so much.
Well, and same talking to you, and thank you so much for all this extra information. It really helps. Okay.
Good.
Because I am writing a book on this issue and I want to reintroduce your father's book because it never, what happened never should have happened. And here's the interesting thing. I want to tell you something about Leslie Emery. Do you have just 1 second?
Sure.
Okay. So I have that People magazine article here. And of course, it's in the back. And I remember these articles. Look out, a guide to the up and coming. Like, and it's got some gal on the side. She's doing some stuff. It's got a picture of Les shoeing a horse. Now, I want you, can I read you what it says?
Sure.
Okay, it says Leslie Emery. Leslie Emery's literary interest seems as quaint as a buggy whip. His book, published last May, is titled Horseshoeing Theory and Hoof Care. He began work on it 5 years ago when his horse Rebel fell victim to navicular lameness, a bone disease which usually cripples an animal. Emery was determined to save Rebel. A friend recommended a farrier, someone who shoes horses, named Jim Miller, who had found ways to counteract the effects of the disease by special shoeing. Miller also had other ideas about proper care of horses' hooves. Emery, then a sophomore at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, decided to write a book on the subject and spent hours talking to Miller and a veterinarian, says Emery. I finally decided I was not going to accept what they said until I did it myself. He took a 15-week farrier course at Oregon State University, then returned home to Lake Oswego, Oregon, and set up his own horseshoeing business. The book took him 3 years to finish, whereupon Emery had a second career, writing. As a major in English composition at Knox College in Illinois last spring, Emery submitted a short story which won first prize for fiction in a literary competition after his graduation in June. Emery, 25, packed up his farrier's equipment and headed back to Oregon, where he intends to shoe horses, eat, and write. You did not even mention your dad's name.
No.
Isn't this wicked?
Oh man.
Isn't that terrible?
Yep.
See, now from what I see, first of all, in the forward in the book or in the acknowledgments, it flat says, that it was Jim Miller and your dad, not this punk here.
Uh-huh.
See, he tried to take all the credit. What? Anyway, it's terrible what he did and how easily he was talked out of that book. And what I'm telling you is the truth. There would be not just horses alive today, but people too, because horses.
I have got to go.
Yeah,
the
I'll
battery's
let you go.
died on this.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, hey, thanks so much, Niles.
You're quite welcome, and I'll talk to you again later.
Okay, dear. Hope so. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.